Hello, this is Kevin. Thank you for joining this recorded series on automating the migration of on-premise WebSphere application and configurations to IBM Bluemix. In part 1 of the video series, you learn how to use IBM Urban Code Deploy to automate the configuration of IBM Bluemix, including the provisioning of WebSphere application server environment, the secure gateway, and much more. In part 2 of the video series, I'll show you how to use IBM Urban Code Deploy in conjunction with the output of the WebSphere application server configuration migration tool to automate the migration of your WAS configuration to IBM Bluemix, targeting the environment that we configured in part 1 of the video series. So on completion of this demonstration, your WebSphere environment on Bluemix will be configured for ongoing automated deployments of your WebSphere application and configuration. And that'll be the focus of part 3 in the video series, optimizing your DevOps process for cloud deployments. So before we get into the demonstration, let me give you a little background on the WebSphere configuration migration tool, because we do use the output of this tool in conjunction with Urban Code Deploy in this demonstration. So the WebSphere configuration migration tool is capable of reading configurations from WebSphere, JBoss, WebLogic, and Tomcat, and it generates either a WSAdmin script for the migration to WebSphere traditional servers, or generates a server.xml file for the migration to WebSphere Liberty. So this tool doesn't migrate 100% of your configuration. However, it does migrate some of the common configurations and suitable for the migration of the configuration for the Plants by WebSphere application that we're going to be using in this demonstration. So the WebSphere provides additional free configuration migration tools that can be used for sophisticated migrations, and IBM Urban Code Deploy can also be useful in executing those configuration tasks as well. So there are a number of steps that need to be followed to use the WebSphere configuration migration tool, and the steps are displayed on the screen, but basically we're going through a series of commands and steps to extract the configuration from a source WebSphere environment, say WebSphere version 7 or version 8, and finally going through all the way to step number 5, we end up with a generated WSAdmin script that we would run on a target system. And in our case, this script is going to be run on our WebSphere application server version 9 on Bluemix. So as part of this demonstration, we're going to actually use IBM Urban Code Deploy to automate the execution of that script in our target environment. And then we will go and further verify that the migration has succeeded by looking at the administrative console. Okay, let's get started with the demo. As you may recall, the setup Bluemix process from the previous video resulted in a new IBM Urban Code Deploy agent being installed on the WebSphere environment on Bluemix. UCD uses deployment agents on target systems to execute tasks on your WebSphere environment, like configuration and application deployments. Our first order of business is to add the deployment agent to the WAS on Bluemix resource tree in Urban Code Deploy. Then we can continue by discovering the WebSphere topology and adding components to the resources tree for the various WebSphere scopes. The component resources are executed on the WAS on Bluemix environment to perform the automated WAS deployments in your DevOps processes. Okay, so let's go ahead and add the agent to the resource tree for our environment. In Urban Code Deploy, I have created a top-level group called WAS-Bluemix, where we're going to store our resources for our environment deployments. So our first order of business is just to select the actions from the pull-down menu and add agent. We simply then just check the agent that we want to use, which is the agent that's actually deployed on the WebSphere on Bluemix environment, and save that configuration. Once the configuration is saved, it'll take a few minutes for the agent to discover the environment and understand which cell that's going to be available for us to add resources to. So after a few moments and clicking the refresh link, we find that the agent has found a WebSphere cell through that agent. So our next step, once we have the cell just found, is to actually configure the discovery of the topology of that WebSphere environment running on Bluemix. So the first thing we need to do is to configure a set of properties to let Urban Code Deploy know how to connect to the particular cell using the credentials that we provide and the paths to the various WebSphere application server directory and profile paths. WSAdmin is the administrative user ID that got created for us when we instantiated the environment on the Bluemix. And I'm putting in the password that generated for me. All of the other information in the properties can be defaulted, so we'll save that configuration. So then the next step is to go ahead and discover the WebSphere topology. So it's a built-in process in Urban Code Deploy, and it uses the information that we provided to connect to the cell, and then it goes off and discovers the topology. Now, what it's looking for is the scopes. What's the name of the cell, the various nodes, and the various servers that are in that topology. At the moment, it's not doing any discovery of the resources that are configured. It's rather just discovering the topology that we can add our resources to in the Urban Code Deploy processes. So that quickly it has gone and discovered the topology. So I'll go ahead and close this window. And once it's been discovered, we can then, whoops, wrong view. We can then go down and actually look at the scopes that it found in our environment. And we'll see it found a cell called Cloudburst Cell, and it discovered a node, and it discovered a server named Server 1. Now for this demonstration, as part of the series, what we want to do is to be able to run the migration script that got generated for us from the configuration migration tools. And I've encompassed that into a component in Urban Code Deploy, which I'll show you in a few minutes. But in order to proceed, we just need to take that component and add it to the resource tree, and I'll add it at the cell scope by adding a new component. And the component is in Urban Code Deploy, and I've named it Run PBW for Plants by WebSphere Migration. Okay, so it's that simple. I have created the component inside of our resource tree. Now for the subsequent demonstrations, we're going to need additional components to actually deploy the applications and add database resources to the environment and those sorts of things. But for now, let's focus on the migration aspect. And this is the only component I need to be able to do that. So now that we have the resources in Urban Code Deploy, let's take a look at that actual component that I just added and show you what it does. Now the component is listed here in the set of components, and components actually are versioned, and I have multiple versions of that component. My latest version is version 2.0, and what you'll find is the resources that are associated with this component is basically a Jython script, the pbw.jython Python script that I've added into the Urban Code Deploy. And this is the script that got generated from the WebSphere configuration migration tools. Now, the process, or this component also is associated with the process that we built. And the process is very simple. It's two particular steps. The first step is that it downloads that script from Urban Code Deploy and moves it and pushes it up to a folder location on the WebSphere on Bluemix environment. In this case, I've told it to go to opt/IBM. The second step is that it actually runs that script. So it goes into opt/IBM and runs that Jython script. Very simple. That's the entire process. So in order to run this process for our application in our Bluemix environment, we need to switch to the Applications tab and then go to our Plants by WebSphere application that I've pre-configured. And notice that I've set up a couple environments. The first environment is our WebSphere 7 environment and this new WebSphere Bluemix environment. So what we need to do is take those resources that we've added to the resource tree and add these resources to our WebSphere environment. So I'll just choose the resources that I've added. And now the resources are available for me to go ahead and run my automation. So at this point, all I have to really do is to run the actual automation, and I've created a very simple process that runs those two steps called migrate to Bluemix. And what you'll notice is I have to pick the versions of the components, the run migration component, the latest version, version 2, but I can add any number of versions that I want, and I'll choose to run the latest version, which is most often the case, and submit that process. So again, this process runs 2 steps. It downloads the script and actually moves it up to the Bluemix environment and then executes the script on the Bluemix environment. So this is going to take a minute or two. So I'm going to pause the video, and when it's complete, I'll come back and resume. Okay, so that only took about 1 minute to execute, and the results are good. I've got a successful execution of that configuration. So from that perspective, what we need to do is just log into our WebSphere Administrative Console and verify that the configurations have indeed been migrated as we expected. So the first thing to note is I don't have any applications. The Plants by WebSphere application has not been migrated at the moment, right? We're going to deploy that in a subsequent step. That's expected. However, I did have some resources that got migrated for accessing the DB2 database for the application. And these are my 2 Plants by WebSphere data sources. So clicking on one of these data sources, what I find is that the configuration is indeed there, and the plant's alias for authenticating to the database has also been configured in the data source. And what you'll notice is that the configurations from my version 7 configuration have been carried over, so the plant's DB and the server name and port number. Now this is going to be important coming up, because running the application from Bluemix will not actually be able to connect to the local host on port 50,000 to the database. We have to go through the secure gateway that we created and established in part 1 of the demo. So if I were to try to connect to that resource, it's clearly not going to connect, but it's going to fail for a number of reasons. The first off, it's going to find that it didn't find any of the DB2 drivers. That's because we haven't moved any of the DB2 drivers to our environment. So that piece plus the updates of the configuration for using the secure gateway to access the database will actually be the emphasis of part 3 of this demonstration series. But for now, it looks like my configurations have been migrated as expected, and we can continue on with the process. Alright, so at this point I'm going to claim victory on the configuration migration to WebSphere on Bluemix. So at this point, all of our WebSphere configuration has been migrated to WebSphere on Bluemix. So in the next video in this series, I'm going to show you how to use IBM Urban Code Deploy to automate the deployments of your application and be able to update the configurations in WebSphere on Bluemix to further optimize our DevOps processes for cloud deployments. So stay tuned for the next video in the series. Thank you.